In our modern times, we are far from travel of yesterday. Barring the travel restrictions of the current pandemic, the hardships of covering great distances is mostly in dealing with time zones. However, the contours of the land are still out there for us to experience. The following shares a trip into the Bob Marshall Wilderness outside of Missoula, Montana during a wilderness first responder class as an exercise in mobility. Yvon Chouinard wrote a book called Climbing Ice. Though it covers the tactics and techniques of ice climbing, a closer look will reveal that this book is about mobility. In the text, Chouinard describes how man is not meant to carry his home on his back. He's talking about free movement that ensues when we have mastered the skill of moving quickly and efficiently in the mountains, a skill that allows a traveler to escape the heavy pack and the modern amenities, and to simply go, climb, travel. For me, this is still over the horizon as I fill a large rucksack for the trip. I'm following a list provided by the trip lead, but without seeing the terrain or experiencing the weather firsthand, I hedge my risk by adding weight to my pack. On the topic of mobility, I've agreed to go into the backcountry with a group of individuals, and prior to setting out on this mode of travel, we've decided to sit around in a group and talk about how we plan to move and what we plan to accomplish over the events.
All this smelly stuff, we have to be really good with the trash. Correct?
That's Trenton, one of our instructors. He leads this forming of the tribe where we set the expectation of who we are and where we fit in. We spend the afternoon in this way talking about food and community gear with the intent of keeping it out of the hands of the bear.
Good.
And then we practice for the worst case scenario.
He's getting mauled!
As we move along this phase of mobility, we pack our stuff into smaller items so that they can be spread load onto our companion, the horse. Or more appropriately, the mule. Mule packers will use these great beasts to haul our stuff into the backcountry, ensuring that some semblance of civilization surrounds us as a link to the modern world. We learn the word for the container that the mules will carry our stuff in, manis. It's a fusion of the Spanish and French word for bag. The lead packer asked us if we've ever read Aldo Leopold's Sand County Almanac, and tells us how Leopold advocated for recreational wilderness as an important place to practice the skill of mule packing. There was a hint that the skill may be lost to the great cities spreading over the land. Throughout this trip, I would find that mule packing is a skill that should be practiced.
Starting off on the mobility trek. Everything up to this point has been in preparation for putting your home on your back and starting to walk on a trail and swamp mosquitoes.
Yet still we step to the trail with too much gear on our backs, slowing the departure from civilization. It is a happy moment when the mule train arrives with all of our gear. Dave, one of our instructors, is from the area and tells me how inefficient we are when we first come into the backcountry. He tells me about how we sweat electrolytes at a rapid rate, and that this is most likely the reason for why I feel the need to drink a liter of miso soup as soon as we arrive at camp. Don't worry, he tells me, you'll be completely acclimatized when we leave in 6 days. With camp set, we hoist up an American flag and begin training. During breaks in our training, and in the noticeable absence of screens, we share stories as in the oral tradition. Trenton, demonstrating primitive fire making here, tells us about a friend who goes to the same spot daily to listen to the bird calls. After a while, the call changed. He figured that the bird has accepted him as part of the environment. As time away from screens drags on, we turn to the primitive skills that will eliminate ounces and pounds from our rucksacks. The bow and drill, the snare, and the fishing pole will all displace ounces, and as we find out, ounces make pounds. Performing what would be a nominal task in the lowlands becomes a defining challenge in the wilderness. Swimming a litter 200 meters across a pool within reach of a gunnel is a moderate task, But add the altitude and open water, and your lungs cry out for air, and you feel the majesty of the place called the wilderness. On day 4, one of our snares catches a squirrel. In the city, there is a thought that it is good to know where your food comes from. Here we have first-hand knowledge of this, and we bumble through the skinning and preparing of this small meal. The taste is of the woods and could be described as gamey, though I think that this would not do it justice. Squirrel to me is the introduction to the wilderness, the entry-level meal for the acclimatizing woodsman. We continued the training, running through scenarios on lightning strikes, gunshot wounds from hunting rifles, and the daily open femur fracture, all the time getting stronger on the climbs and quicker with finding dead trees to cut down to make litters. At night, the only reprieve from the bugs is being the mesh of the tents, and there is still buzzing that reminds that they wait for us to emerge. As our time in the bob, as we refer to it, drags on, we find moments of quiet around the camp. Ground fires are not allowed, so the mules carried up a fire pit that we stare into as our smelly trash is burned, and as a precaution to keep the bears away. On the last day, the mules return, and we go through the process of separating our gear into the manis. As evidence of our camp is washed away, Andy, another teammate of mine and a survival instructor, calls us to gather around. I would read this to my team every time we'd go into the field, he says, looking at his phone. What followed was a 4-minute poem by the American poet Robert Service called I'm Scared of It All. In the prose, Service professes his fear of the city and how he wishes to be back in the woods, in canoes, on ice fields, in mining camps. He finds that the city is the dangerous place. The poem ends with the verse, to be forming good habits up there, to be starving on rabbits up there. In your hunger and woe, though it's 60 below, oh, I know that it's safer up there. Our time in the wilderness will soon end, I think. I also think that Dave was right. I'm beginning to feel acclimatized.
When I come to Montana, I really like to mule pack because these animals are some of the finest bred animals you can find, and they do a great job of carrying our stuff. A lot of good fun with these guys and a great experience.